Right, we are back on the record. You can see the little red dot at the upper right-hand corner of the screen. That means that we are recording. So we took the break. We've got Secretary Carr here, and I forgot to ask the parties, is anybody going to get a transcript that is a transcription of this WebEx so that I can use that in making my decision? If you don't, then of course I have to make my decision based on my notes for the most part, because this hearing is already scheduled for 3 days. And if it goes longer than that, this is a lot of work to do. And I don't really have time to review all of these recordings. So I'm going to try to make my notes the best that I can if I know that you are not going to give me a transcript. Mr. Cross?
We'll see. I mean, we've got enough burdens on us as it is. So if they're gonna do it, we'll see what happens.
Okay, Mr. Mullenbach, are you going to get a transcript?
At this point in time, I would want to get a transcript. Yes, Judge.
Okay, well, you will have to arrange for that and get someone to a reliable third-party transcriptionist who's going to make a verified copy of this document. Yes. So if you want to work with Mr. Cross to see if they're interested in participating in that, that's fine. But I'm going to rely on you, Mr. Mullenbach, to do that, and I'm going to let you go at your own pace because you agreed that you're going to do that.
Judge, I want to be clear. I want to do that. I would need to get approval, but I certainly am going to seek approval to do it. I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, so then I will treat it as though you've not said you're going to do it, because I can't, do conditional. It has to be one or the other. All right, so then assuming that we don't get a transcript, we're going to go on with Secretary Cross, Kevin Cross, and Mr. Cross, will raise your right hand.
Mr. Carr.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Carr. I appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Mullenbach has done the same thing. Thank you, Mr. Carr. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And you understand that the failure to answer truthfully is subjects you to the possibility of perjury?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, then, if you will begin your, I see it's an adverse examination. Mr. Cross, go ahead.
I appreciate that clarification, Judge. So, Mr. Carr, are you employed by the Department of Corrections?
Yes.
How are you employed by the Department of Corrections?
I am the Secretary of the Department of Corrections.
Okay, and when did you become the Secretary?
In January of 2019.
Okay, and how did you become the Secretary?
I was appointed by Governor Tony Evers.
Okay. Before you were, I guess let's put it like this, do you have any training in being the Secretary of the Department of Corrections?
No specific training for being the Secretary of the Department of Corrections.
Okay, do you have any experience in management?
Yes.
What is that experience?
Prior to being appointed to the position of Secretary of the Department of Corrections, I was the U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Wisconsin, and I was appointed by President Barack Obama to that position in 2010. Prior to 2010, I was the second in command at the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, where I worked for 30 years, but I was the number 2 person in charge of the day-to-day operation from 2002 to 2010.
Is that the chief deputy or something else?
That's another way to describe it. At the sheriff's department at that time, it was called the inspector. Many sheriff's offices call it a chief deputy or an undersheriff.
Right. Okay. Well, but we're talking about Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And so at that time, there was nobody between an inspector and the sheriff. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay. Were there other inspectors at that time?
No.
Okay. So
well, yes, there was one in the jail. He kind of was the third in command. His name was Richard Schmidt, but the chain of command was the sheriff, myself, and then Inspector Schmidt. He only looked after the detention bureau.
Okay. So you didn't have any detention experience at that time, just
Oh,
long?
no, I had. I mean, in fact, because of the chain of command, the inspector in the jail primarily reported to me, and I had worked in corrections in the jail for a number of years prior to my appointment as the inspector.
Okay. And so when you became the secretary of the Department of Corrections, were you then responsible for hiring and firing decisions?
That's part of my duties.
Okay. And did you receive any training on hiring and firing at that time?
Not specifically related to my position as secretary of the Department of Corrections.
Okay. And you also, as secretary of the Department of Corrections, receive investigations. Isn't that right?
I'm gonna object to vague.
Sure. And I'll correct that to say disciplinary investigations.
Could you speak up, please, Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, say again.
Sure. So as part of your job as the secretary, you receive disciplinary investigations. Is that right?
I do review them and make decisions on discipline.
Okay. And have you received any training? And can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Okay. Have you received any training in reviewing those investigations at any time?
Specifically as it relates to my role as secretary, no.
Okay. And how about discrimination? Have you received any training in evaluating discrimination anytime?
Yes.
Okay. What is that training?
Annually, every state employee is required to take required courses offered virtually on discrimination and equity and inclusion.
Okay. And so, for example, all Department of Correction employees would have been required to take those classes, right?
Yes, and I am as well every
Okay.
year.
So are there any training that you've taken other than those that all state of Wisconsin employees must take?
Oh, there's a number of courses that we're all required to take, whether they range in subjects from internet security to how to interview people for a job, a number of different subjects that we're all required to take.
So let's just focus in on your, because you'll admit that your position as secretary is somewhat unique in state employment, right?
I would, yes.
Okay. Because, for example, you can hire and fire, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You can also settle lawsuits, correct?
I am asked for my opinion, or I am asked sometimes to make decisions about settling lawsuits.
Okay. And are you able to authorize investigations into subordinate employees?
I am.
Okay. And based on those answers, do you believe that your position within the state of Wisconsin is unique with respect to those powers?
Yes and no.
Okay. As the secretary for the Department of Correction, do you have any responsibility over escapes from Department of Correction facilities?
Ultimately, I am responsible for everything that takes place in the Department of Corrections.
How do you know that?
because I'm the head of the agency. Um, I don't take that responsibility lightly.
Great, thanks for that answer. So what are your responsibilities for when there are escapes at Department of Corrections institutions?
Well, the primary goal would be to try to recover the persons who escaped. That's our primary job at the Department of Corrections as far as the Division of Adult Institutions is to keep people in custody until the courts have authorized us to release them.
Okay, so other than attempting to return them to your custody, do you have any other obligations or duties?
Of course, overseeing the work and operations of those in the agency and, um, you know, doing the necessary follow-up that's required to determine, what happened, when, where, why. Um, all of those things are critical to process improvement.
Okay, can we call those investigations or something else?
Well, well, if you're only talking, well, let me put it to you this way. Um, Not every event that is subject to management oversight requires an investigation.
Great, let's focus on escapes then. Are all escapes require an investigation or something else?
Yes, I mean, of course, anybody that escapes from a certain like a medium or maximum security facility would require an investigation as to um, the circumstances that led to that person escaping.
Okay, is there a difference for minimum security institutions?
Well, I would say there is because um, I have often questioned the practice of describing a person that we allow out into the community on work release who fails to return for whatever reason as an escape. I view that as a walkaway. There's a big difference between a person who we allow out into the community that um, makes a decision not to return for whatever reason and a person who affects a legitimate escape.
How do you distinguish between the two?
I just did.
I see that. Is that something that happens on a case by case basis, or do you just repeat those words?
I don't understand your
How do
question.
you know? It sounds like, and maybe I'm wrong on missing something here, but it sounds like if there is somebody leaves your custody at a minimum security institution, there is a discretionary question of whether or not it's a walkaway or escape. Do I have
No,
that
it's
right?
not. Our agency classifies any of those types of events as an escape. That's what they describe it as. What I was trying to communicate to you is that that is, that is viewed differently than a person who um, is not authorized to be in the community and escapes custody and is and then as a result of their actions end up in the community against our wishes.
Okay, I think I got that difference there. So then does that mean that there is on a case by case basis in a minimum security escape, there is an investigation or something else?
Um, Generally something else. When a person walks away, excuse me, walks, excuse me.
Do you need to
When a-
get some water?
I have some, thank you. When a person walks away from a work release site, for instance, there are a number of reports that are written and, um, operational reviews that take place to determine if there was something that we could have done to prevent that. But oftentimes, when you are intentionally allowing someone into the community and you drop them off somewhere and you're expecting to pick them up at the end of their work shift and they aren't there, that is something that it's number one, it's a risk that we accept by allowing people to have access to work release. And we usually don't have the level of inquiry related to personnel involvement in those issues unless it's warranted. If there is some suspicion or some information that we have that would cause us to determine that more investigation is needed, then we do it.
Okay, and I guess I'm going to back up a second and try to explain to you where I'm trying to go. So hopefully that'll help us to get there. Is there a set of escapes which there is always an investigation for?
Well, I would certainly say folks that escape from a medium or maximum security facility that,
Okay, and we can.
I
think I understood that
in
from the
fact,
previous question. I hate to interrupt you. I'm just going to focus you on that then.
okay.
Do you, if there's an escape from a maximum or medium institution, do you receive an investigation or some other documents showing what the results of the investigation were?
Yes.
Okay, how does that come to you?
Well, if there is an internal investigation because we believe that there was some staff misconduct that led or contributed to the escape, we can get it through that route. There's another route where agency members review the incident to determine if there were operational issues or procedural things that could have been done to prevent the escape and why did it occur in the first place. So there's more in it. Both of them are administrative functions, but
Okay.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. And so I think I understand that, which is you're saying, so correct me if I'm wrong, there can be more than one kind of investigation in an escape. One of them is an operational investigation. Another kind is the misconduct investigation. Do I understand that?
That's correct.
Are there any other kind of investigations?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. And did I understand you to say that the misconduct investigation is discretionary on your part?
Give me a minute. I'm trying to discretionary. Yes.
Okay. And then again, because now we have this distinction, the operational investigation, is that discretionary?
No, that's a matter of policy and procedure.
Okay.
But most disciplinary cases are a matter of discretion if it is not clear that there is a bright line violation of the rules and regulations.
Okay. Is there a formal procedure for making that determination?
Nope.
Okay. How is that determination made if you know?
I can only tell you, first of all, an informal internal investigation or a formal internal investigation in our agency can be instituted at a number of levels. It's not just happening at my level. You can have a warden that becomes aware of some activity that they believe violates the rules, and they can request that an investigation be conducted. I don't even necessarily approve that. And that ranges from sick absences to tardinesses to more serious misconduct. And it can happen at those levels in the agency. As far as my evaluation goes, is that oftentimes when a serious incident occurs, it'll be brought to my attention, and based on the preliminary facts that I have been given, we'll ask someone on my staff, probably my human resource director or my deputy secretary or assistant deputy secretary, are there rules and regulations that pertain to this conduct? And if so, does it, sound like this is something that we should investigate and determine what the facts are? And if that's the case, then we move forward with an investigation.
Sir, did you understand that my last question only had to deal with escapes and not other forms of misconduct?
No, I didn't, but I mean, you asked about me. How did investigations become authorized?
Sure. How do disciplinary, then I'll re-ask the question then. Thank you for that clarification. How do disciplinary investigations into escapes get authorized?
They can happen. They can happen at the warden level. They can happen at the administrator level. They can happen at my level.
Okay. And again, you started as secretary in 2019?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just so for context and for the pandemic, do you remember what month that was?
January of 2019.
Okay, I understand. So let's say between January of 2019 and January of 2022, so that's 3 years, about how many escapes have happened at the Wisconsin Department of Corrections?
I'm sorry, what was the end date, did you say, Mr. Cross?
I'm trying to capture 3 years here. So the beginning of 2019 and the end date I have is January of 2022.
Okay, go ahead,
I'm
thank
going to
you.
object to relevance as to any point after April 16, 2020. Mr. Carr, I'm sorry, Mr. Cross, the complaint essentially alleges that Ms. Novak was treated differently than people prior were treated. So anything after that date is entirely irrelevant.
Okay, Mr. Cross?
Well, continuing that, we're trying to get just general background here, Judge, on what the policy and procedure are for escapes. So if we want, I mean, what I'm trying to do here is just to get the concept of how many escapes there are and what the policy and procedure and how they actually follow that with that. So if we want to get a smaller set, that's perfectly fine. I just picked 3 years here. I'm certainly not wedded to that amount, but it seems like round years are going to be the best way to compare here.
Okay, just go to the date. What was the date that Mr. Mullenbach said?
April 16, 2020.
And what happened that date?
That was the escape that forms the basis of this hearing.
Okay, and when was she terminated?
She was not terminated. She
Oh, that's right,
resigned.
she retired. And when did that retirement recur?
It was on the day of the pre-hearing meeting. I don't recall the exact date off the top of my head. I believe it was April 29. I could be wrong on that, though. I'd have to double check, Judge.
All right, I'm going to go through April 29, 2020. So that would have been the information that was available before Ms. Novak left her employment with the respondent. Go ahead. So January 2019, to January, no, to April 29th, 2020, Mr. Carr. You can answer the question about how many escapes, if you know.
Judge, I'm sorry to interrupt. The date was actually June 29th. I apologize. I just wanted to correct
June
it for the record.
29th? Okay,
That
sorry.
sounds
Thank you.
better
Yeah, I was,
or more accurate.
All right, June 29th, 2020. Okay, so do you have those dates in your head, Mr. Carr?
I do.
Okay. So the question was how many escapes? Is that correct, Mr. Cross?
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
The only escapes that I can recall from a medium or maximum security facility from January 2019 to the end of June 2020 is one.
Okay. And do you have a computer in front of you right now?
I do.
Are you consulting at
Well,
any
he's
time?
not supposed to have a computer in front of him other than the one that he's using for this hearing,
I mean,
correct?
that's,
You're just
yeah,
using
that's
it
the
for the
one
hearing.
that I'm looking at.
Okay, go ahead.
You're not consulting any documents here, is that right?
Nope,
Okay.
don't have anything in front of me.
All right. So it's your belief that this is the only escape that happened between your January of 2019 and June of 2020. Is that right?
From a medium or maximum security facility that I can recall.
Okay. How about otherwise?
Otherwise, as far as folks that walked away from a minimum security facility that I believe, you know, is truly not an escape, I don't even know the number.
Objection, Judge, is non-responsive. Can you direct him to answer the question?
I said I don't know
You
the
did.
answer.
Did you remember how many walkaways there were during that period, Mr. Carr, from a
I don't
minimum
know.
security?
I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And what escape was this?
It was the one that's the subject of this hearing on April 16th, 2020 from Columbia Correctional Institution.
Okay.